I remember the night like it was yesterday. The clock had just struck midnight when I overheard my daughter-in-law laughing in the kitchen, her voice sharp and smug as she whispered to my son, "The house is ours soon." Those words cut deeper than any knife. She thought I was asleep. She thought I was too old, too frail to hear. But I heard every syllable. And in that moment, something inside me shifted. They believed I was powerless. They were wrong. If you love justice stories, like and subscribe. And tell me where you are watching from. Because what I am about to share is not just about betrayal. It is about the power of wisdom, and how one old woman turned cruelty into a lesson that echoed through generations. My name is Margaret. I am 74 years old, with silver hair that still shines when the sun touches it through my kitchen window. My late husband, Thomas, built this house with his bare hands 50 years ago. Every brick carries his sweat, every corner carries our laughter, and every tree outside was planted with love. To me, this house is not just wood and stone. It is memory, heritage, and promise. For years, I thought my son Daniel would carry that promise forward. He was my only child, the boy who once clung to my skirt when thunder rolled across the sky. But life changes people, and love can blind them. Daniel fell for a woman named Evelyn, and from the first moment, I sensed the hunger behind her smile. She was beautiful, yes, but her beauty had sharp edges, and her eyes darted like someone always calculating. I welcomed her into the family despite my hesitation. After all, a mother must trust her child's choice. The wedding was modest, but I remember Evelyn's hand never leaving her phone, her lips pursed in annoyance when she thought no one was looking. At first, the cracks were small. A whispered remark about how old-fashioned my curtains looked. A sharp laugh when I offered her one of my handmade quilts. I let them slide, convincing myself I was too sensitive. But then, she began suggesting changes in the house. "We should renovate the kitchen," she told Daniel one evening. "Once it is ours, we can make it modern. Once it is ours." The words burned, but I stayed silent. Because silence, when chosen carefully, is not weakness. It is a strategy. The months passed, and I watched as Evelyn's mask slipped further. She laughed when I struggled to carry groceries. She rolled her eyes when I told stories from the past. And Daniel, my sweet Daniel, sat quietly, caught between loyalty and love, never daring to defend me. Still, I endured. I smiled when I had to, kept my garden blooming, and made sure the neighbors still saw me as the cheerful grandmother they adored. But inside, I was building something Evelyn could never see. A wall of resolve. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in fiery streaks, Evelyn cornered Daniel in the living room. I heard her say it then, clear as glass breaking. "She is old. She cannot last forever. The deed will be ours, and then we can finally live the way we deserve." Her arrogance was her flaw. She spoke too freely, too confidently. And that confidence would be her downfall. Because by then, I had already begun making plans. Quietly. Secretly. With a pen, some papers, and a lawyer who knew the value of discretion. I smiled to myself as I brewed tea that night, the smell of chamomile rising with the steam. They thought I was fading. They thought I was blind. But I was awake, and my mind was sharper than ever. And what I set in motion would change everything. The storm had only begun. The first real crack between us came one rainy Saturday morning. I had just finished baking an apple pie, the kind Daniel loved since he was a boy. I could still see him in my memory, a 7-year-old with flour on his nose, licking the spoon while I shooed him away from the oven. I set the pie on the counter, the steam curling upward, filling the kitchen with warmth and cinnamon. Evelyn walked in, her heels clicking on the tiles, her perfume sharp and overwhelming against the homely smell. She glanced at the pie, then smirked. "Still making those old-fashioned desserts?" she said. "Daniel prefers tiramisu now. You know, something a little more sophisticated." I smiled gently. "He always loved apple pie." Her eyes narrowed. "That was years ago. He is not a boy anymore. He deserves better now." The words stung not because of the pie, but because of what she meant beneath them. She was not talking about dessert. She was talking about me. Later that evening, I found the pie untouched, shoved to the side, while a store-bought tiramisu sat proudly in the fridge. Daniel kissed Evelyn's cheek and told her she always knew how to make things special. He did not even notice my silence. That was the first betrayal. But it was only the beginning. 2 weeks later, I came downstairs one morning and found Evelyn standing by the old oak cabinet in the hallway. My husband had carved that cabinet with his hands, his initials hidden beneath the base. It was sacred to me, a reminder of the man who gave me this life. Evelyn's voice was casual, but her eyes were sharp as she said, This old thing is falling apart. Once the house is ours, we should get rid of it. Maybe replace it with something modern. Sleek. White. I felt my knees weaken. This was Thomas's work. He made it himself. She shrugged. Exactly. Old, heavy, and not worth anything. But do not worry. Once everything is in our name, I will make sure Daniel buys you something new. Something easier for you to manage. She thought she was kind. She thought replacing memory with plastic was generosity. But I heard her true meaning. Once everything is in our name. That night, I sat on my bed, my hands trembling as I ran them across the quilt Thomas and I had shared for decades. It was not about furniture. It was not about dessert. It was about erasing me. Slowly, piece by piece, until I was nothing but a memory in the house she claimed would soon belong to her. And Daniel, oh Daniel, my son who once swore he would never leave me alone in this world. He stood beside her silently. He nodded when she spoke of our house. He let her words pass as truth, even though he knew this home was mine. One evening, I tried to speak to him directly. We were alone in the garden, the hydrangeas blooming in shades of blue and violet. I asked softly, Daniel, do you remember when you planted these with me? You were only 12. He smiled faintly. Of course, Mother. I looked into his eyes. Do you remember what your father said? That this home should always be kept in the family, for love and not greed. Daniel's smile faltered. He glanced away. Evelyn just wants what is best for us. She worries about the future. The future, I repeated, my voice trembling. And where am I in the future? He did not answer. He simply excused himself, muttering something about Evelyn waiting inside. My heart cracked then, because betrayal does not always come with daggers or raised voices. Sometimes it comes with silence, with the cowardice of the ones you love most. That night, I sat by the window as rain tapped against the glass. I thought of Thomas. I thought of the promise we had made, and for the first time in years I cried. But when the tears ended, I looked out at the storm, and a thought struck me with the clarity of lightning. If Evelyn and Daniel were willing to betray me quietly, I would have to fight back quietly too. Not with anger, not with pleading, but with something they could never defeat. Wisdom. The first betrayal hurt, but it also awakened me. Because betrayal is not the end. It is the beginning of reckoning. And they would never see it coming. The betrayals did not stop at pie or furniture. No, they grew thicker, layered like storm clouds building before a thunderclap. Evelyn's arrogance became bolder, her tongue sharper, her schemes more transparent. One morning, I woke to voices carrying from the dining room. Daniel's low murmur, hesitant. Evelyn's tone, commanding. She will not live forever, Evelyn said. And when she is gone, we must already be prepared. The house should be transferred sooner rather than later. Otherwise, legal matters will drag. Do you want us stuck in paperwork while we could be living free? Daniel sighed. I do not want to pressure her. She has lived here her whole life. Evelyn scoffed. Pressure? You call that pressure? She should be grateful we are even willing to take it on. This place is ancient. It needs so many repairs. Once we have it, we can remodel, sell if we wish, and finally move into a modern neighborhood. Sell. That word cracked like a whip in my chest. She wanted to sell Thomas's legacy. She wanted to rip roots from the earth and toss them aside like weeds. I stood frozen at the stairwell, the wallpaper cold against my palm. For the first time, I realized Evelyn did not merely want the house. She wanted to erase everything I had built, everything my husband had left behind. And Daniel, my boy, sat quietly, torn between guilt and weakness. I went back to my room before they could see me. My heart pounded. My breath shook. But my mind sharpened. If Evelyn was preparing for my death, I would prepare for her greed. Days later, I discovered her next betrayal. I returned from church one Sunday afternoon and found strangers walking through my garden. A couple, young and stylish, pointing at the hydrangeas at the swing Thomas had built at the very walls of my home. I asked, "Can I help you?" The man smiled awkwardly. "Oh, we are here for the showing." My stomach dropped. Showing? Evelyn appeared at the door, her voice sweet like honey poisoned with venom. "Oh, Margaret, I forgot to tell you. We are just exploring our options. No harm in seeing the market value, right?" I stared at her, my hands trembling. "This is not your house to show." She tilted her head, her smile smug. "Not yet." The couple exchanged uneasy glances, then excused themselves quickly. Evelyn shut the door, her mask slipping. "Do not look so shocked. It is only a matter of time. Might as well be ready." I felt rage rising, hot and violent. But I forced it down, burying it deep beneath calm. because anger would only feed her victory. That night, I wrote in my journal, the same leather-bound book Thomas once used to sketch his cabinet designs. I wrote down every word she had spoken, every look, every laugh. It was no longer just memory. It was evidence. And then came betrayal wrapped in silk. It was Daniel's birthday. I spent the morning preparing his favorite roast chicken, the way his father once taught him to season with rosemary from the garden. I set the table with our finest china, the one reserved for holidays and milestones. When they arrived, Evelyn walked in with bags from a luxury store, laughing loudly. She handed Daniel a gold watch and kissed him, making sure I saw. Daniel beamed. "Thank you, love. It is perfect." Evelyn turned to me, her smile as sharp as glass. "Oh, Margaret, you did not need to cook. We already made reservations at the new Italian place downtown. Daniel deserves the best, not." She waved a dismissive hand at the food. "This old tradition." Daniel avoided my eyes. I looked at the chicken cooling on the table, the plates untouched, and for the first time in years my appetite vanished. It was not just a betrayal of me. It was a betrayal of memory, betrayal of tradition, betrayal of a mother's love. I excused myself quietly, retreating to my room. From there, I could hear them laughing as they left for their dinner. The sound echoed through the house like ghosts mocking me. That night I did not cry. Not a single tear. Instead, I sat at my desk, the lamplight soft against the papers spread before me. A lawyer's card, a draft of a will, a blank deed. If Evelyn wanted the house so badly, she would learn the truth soon enough. Because while she plotted openly, I was plotting in silence. And silence is the deadliest weapon of all. But even then, the betrayals deepened. One afternoon, I overheard Evelyn speaking on the phone. Her voice was low, but not low enough. "Yes, once the deed is in our name, we will put it on the market. Oh, at least 500,000. Yes, more if we get the kitchen redone. Oh, do not worry about Margaret. She will not be around long." I leaned against the wall, my pulse quickening. The way she spoke of me, as though I were already gone, sent a chill through my bones. I realized then Evelyn's greed was not a passing whim. It was a storm gathering strength. But storms can be redirected. The question was, how long could I endure the thunder before striking with lightning of my own? The answer, not much longer. The tension in the house thickened like smoke. Every glance Evelyn gave me was sharper, every laugh more cruel, and every whisper with Daniel a dagger slid between my ribs. But while they thought I was weakening, I was quietly planting seeds of my own. One of those seeds was Mr. Harris, my lawyer. A quiet man with spectacles perched on the end of his nose, who had handled Thomas's estate years ago. I met him discreetly one Tuesday afternoon at his office, carrying a plain folder tucked under my arm. He leaned forward as I spoke. "She thinks the house will be hers. She mocks me in my own home. I cannot let my husband's legacy die in her hands." Mr. Harris nodded. "You want to transfer the deed elsewhere?" "Yes," I said firmly. "But it must be done quietly. No one, not my son, not his wife, can know until the time is right." His lips pressed into a line. "I know exactly how to arrange it. We will prepare everything. But Margaret, are you ready for the storm that will follow?" I met his eyes steadily. "I have lived through storms before. This one I will control." I left his office lighter, though the weight of betrayal still pressed on me. That night, I returned home and found Evelyn rearranging the living room, my husband's old rocking chair shoved into the corner like trash. "Do not worry, Margaret," she said sweetly. "Once this is our house, we will redecorate properly. Everything will finally look new." I smiled, my voice calm. "Yes, Evelyn. Everything will look new." She smirked, not knowing how true my words were. Days turned into weeks, and Evelyn's schemes grew louder. She invited her friends over, showing off rooms as though she already owned them. "Imagine this wall knocked out," she told a woman one evening, sipping wine with a careless laugh. "We could make it open plan. Perfect for parties. Poor Margaret, she has no vision. But once she is gone, we will make this place shine." The woman giggled. "And Daniel agrees?" "Of course," Evelyn said smugly. "He knows it will all be ours soon." I stood at the doorway, unseen, my heart steady. Let her mock. Let her gloat. She was only weaving the rope she would hang herself with. Meanwhile, I made quiet moves. I visited the notary. I signed papers under my maiden name to keep them hidden. I even reached out to a distant cousin, Clara, who lived 2 towns over. She was kind, unmarried, and had always cherished the history of our family. Over tea, I told her softly, "Clara, I may need your help one day. The house might not survive unless it rests in hands that respect it." Her eyes widened. Margaret, are you saying? I placed my hand over hers. Not yet. But soon. Back at home, Evelyn continued her charade. She bought new curtains without asking, tossed my quilts into storage, and even hinted to neighbors that the house would soon be theirs. One neighbor, Mrs. Collins, pulled me aside after church. Margaret, I heard Evelyn say something unsettling. She told Mrs. Grant that they were planning to retire to a nursing home soon, and they would take over the property. Is that true? My blood chilled, though I kept my face calm. No, Mrs. Collins. I am not leaving my home. Not yet. Not ever, unless by choice. Her brows knitted. Then why would she? Because Evelyn has her dreams, I said quietly. But dreams and reality do not always meet. That evening, I watched Daniel mow the lawn, his head bent, his movements stiff. When he came inside, Evelyn greeted him with a glass of wine, kissing his cheek. I caught the way she whispered, her lips brushing his ear. Soon, love. Soon it will all be ours. He did not notice me watching. I went to my room, closed the door, and locked it. From a hidden drawer, I pulled out the signed deed Mr. Harris had prepared. My name was no longer alone. Another name rested there, waiting like a hidden sword. The paper trembled in my hands, not from fear, but from anticipation. Because while Evelyn thought she was closing in on her prize, I had already taken it from under her nose. But timing was everything. If I revealed too soon, she would twist Daniel against me further. If I waited too long, she might tighten her grip beyond undoing. So I stayed silent. I played the frail old woman, smiling softly, nodding at her cruel words, even letting her believe she was winning. But inside, I was counting the days. Because when the storm finally broke, Evelyn would not find triumph waiting. She would find justice. And justice is always colder when it comes from silence. It was a Sunday afternoon when the first real crack in Evelyn's mask began to show. I was in the kitchen preparing tea when I heard the doorbell ring. Evelyn hurried to answer, her heels sharp against the floor. A man's voice followed, smooth, professional, rehearsed. Mrs. Daniels? I am here to finalize the appraisal. Once the paperwork is signed, we can begin the listing. Appraisal. Listing. The word struck me like thunder. Evelyn was already moving forward with selling the house, without a deed, without my consent. She was gambling with a future she did not own. I stepped out, my voice calm but cutting. Evelyn, what is this? She froze for a moment, then smiled too brightly. Oh, Margaret, it is nothing. Just a consultation. No harm done. The man extended his hand politely. I am sorry, ma'am. I was told you were aware of the process. I met his eyes firm. This house is not for sale. And it never will be. You may leave. The man hesitated, glanced at Evelyn, then excused himself quickly. She shut the door with a slam, her face flushing red. You embarrassed me, she snapped. Daniel and I are trying to prepare for the future, and you stand in the way at every turn. I set the teapot down gently. It is not your future you are preparing for, Evelyn. It is mine. Her lip curled. You are old, Margaret. You cannot cling to this house forever. Daniel and I deserve a chance to live better. You had your life. Now step aside. For a moment, the room felt silent except for the ticking of the old clock on the wall. My hands were steady, though my heart pounded. Evelyn, I said softly, do not mistake silence for surrender. Her eyes flashed, but before she could retort, Daniel entered. He looked between us, his face clouded with unease. What is going on? He asked. Evelyn turned to him dramatically. Your mother is sabotaging us again. She refuses to let us move forward. She told the appraiser to leave. Daniel's brow furrowed. Mother, is this true? I looked at him, my voice even. Yes, it is true. Because this house is not hers to sell. It is mine. And until I say otherwise, it stays that way. He shifted uncomfortably, caught in the tug-of-war between us. Maybe we should all calm down. But Evelyn cut him off, her tone sharp. No, Daniel. She is manipulating you. She wants to control us forever. She will never give us freedom unless we take it. The words hung heavy in the air. Take it. Daniel looked at me, then at her, his jaw tight. We will talk about this later. He left the room, but Evelyn stayed. Her smile was thin, dangerous. You cannot fight me forever, Margaret. Sooner or later, the house will be ours. I held her gaze, my voice low. Sooner or later, Evelyn, you will learn a lesson you will never forget. That night, I wrote in my journal again. My hands moved quickly across the page, recording every word, every threat, every slip of arrogance. It was no longer just evidence. It was my weapon. And I knew then, the confrontation was coming. It would not be behind closed doors this time. It would be where everyone could see. Because evil that hides in shadows must sometimes be dragged into the light. The stage was nearly set. And Evelyn, in her arrogance, had no idea the spotlight was waiting for her. The moment of truth came sooner than I expected. Daniel's birthday was approaching again, and Evelyn decided it was the perfect occasion to gather family and neighbors in our soon-to-be home, as she boldly put it. She made invitations without asking me, ordered catering, and strutted about the house like a queen rehearsing for coronation. I said nothing. I let her arrange the tables, hire the musicians, and boast about the grand evening. But in the quiet, I was preparing a different script. The night of the party arrived. Guests trickled in, their laughter mingling with the soft sound of violins Evelyn had insisted upon. Candles glowed against the old oak beams Thomas had built, and the smell of roasted lamb filled the air. Everyone admired the house, but Evelyn never missed a chance to remind them that soon it would be hers. "Once Daniel and I make a few changes," she told Mrs. Collins, swirling her wine, "this house will finally live up to its potential. Margaret has held on to it for so long, but it is time for us to breathe new life into it." Mrs. Collins glanced at me nervously, but I only smiled. "Yes," I said softly. "Change is coming." The guests laughed, the music played, and Evelyn basked in the glow of imagined ownership. Daniel, ever the shadow to her light, smiled weakly, sipping his drink. Then came the moment. Evelyn clinked her glass, drawing everyone's attention. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice dripping with triumph, "thank you for joining us tonight. This house has stood for generations, but soon it will enter a new chapter. Daniel and I have plans, big plans, and we cannot wait to share them." Gasps of approval rippled through the room. She raised her glass higher. "To the future of our home." The words echoed against the walls like betrayal itself. My time had come. I stood slowly, the room quieting as I moved. My hands rested gently on the back of my chair, my voice calm but carrying weight. "Before we toast," I said, "there is something that must be made clear." Evelyn's smile faltered. "Margaret, really, this is not." I lifted a hand, silencing her. "For months, I have heard whispers in this house. Plans made without my consent. Dreams built on sand. I have been mocked, dismissed, and spoken of as though I were already gone. But let us set the record straight tonight, before family, friends, and neighbors." The guests shifted uneasily. Daniel's face paled. Evelyn forced a laugh. "She is just confused, everyone. Do not mind her." "Confused?" I said, my tone sharp now. "No, Evelyn. I am not confused. I am prepared." I reached into my handbag and pulled out the envelope I had carried for weeks. The deed. The very soul of the house, bound in legal ink. Gasps filled the room as I placed it on the table. My voice steadied like a blade. "This house no longer belongs to me alone. It has been transferred. Signed. Sealed. Protected. And not to you, Evelyn. Not to you, Daniel. To someone who will honor its history, not sell it for profit." The room erupted with whispers. Evelyn's face twisted in fury, her glass shattering against the floor as she slammed it down. You liar," she hissed. "You cannot do this. This was supposed to be ours." Daniel's voice cracked. "Mother, what have you done?" I turned to him, my heart breaking but my resolve unshaken. "I did what you would not, Daniel. I protected your father's legacy. I protected the home you were too weak to defend." The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by Evelyn's trembling voice. "Who? Who did you give it to?" I met her eyes, my voice quiet but cutting. "Not to you." Her rage boiled over. She slammed her fist on the table, startling the guests. "You think you are clever? You think this will stop me? Daniel, say something." But Daniel was pale, frozen, his hands shaking as he stared at the deed. For the first time, he seemed to see her clearly, not as a wife, but as a storm that had consumed him. The guests began to murmur. Some shook their heads in disgust. Mrs. Collins whispered, shameful. To treat her like this after all she has done. Evelyn's face flushed crimson. She turned on me like a predator cornered. "You cannot win, Margaret. You are old. Weak. You cannot keep fighting us." I straightened, my voice ringing clear. "I do not need to fight. I have already won." The room fell into stunned silence. Evelyn's eyes darted wildly, her perfect mask crumbling as she realized the truth. Her scheming, her arrogance, her whispers. All of it had collapsed in front of the very audience she hoped to impress. But I knew the storm was not over. This was only the first strike of lightning. The thunder was still coming. The party had dissolved into whispers, every eye darting between me, Evelyn, and Daniel. My words had landed like stones in a still pond, rippling outward until no corner of the room was untouched. But I knew this was not the end. This was only the spark. Evelyn's fury blazed hotter with every second. Her painted smile had vanished, replaced by the raw snarl of someone cornered. She stepped closer, her voice a venomous hiss meant for me alone. "You will regret this, old woman." I looked her in the eyes, calm as a lake. "No, Evelyn. Regret belongs to those who built their lives on greed." She recoiled as though my words struck her, but her pride was not so easily broken. She turned to the guests, her voice rising, desperate to regain control. "She is senile," Evelyn cried, her hands trembling as she gestured wildly. "She does not know what she is doing. Daniel, tell them. Tell them your mother is losing her mind." All eyes turned to my son. Daniel's face was pale, his eyes darting between his wife and me. His lips parted, but no words came. And in his silence, Evelyn's desperation grew. "Do you all not see?" she snapped. "This house is falling apart. It needs us. Without me, it will rot. Margaret should be thanking me, not humiliating me." Her voice cracked under the weight of her own arrogance. The guests shifted uncomfortably, some whispering, others glaring at her. I let her rant. I let her unravel. Because sometimes the best revenge is simply giving someone enough rope. Finally, when her voice faltered and her breath came sharp and shallow, I spoke again, my tone steady and commanding. "You say I am weak, that I am senile, that I cannot hold on to this home. But I did not come here empty-handed." From my bag, I pulled the journal, my careful record of every word she had spoken, every plan, every insult, every betrayal. I opened it, my voice firm as I read aloud. "Once she is gone, the house will be ours. We will sell it. We will be rich." Gasps echoed through the room. Evelyn's face was drained of color. I turned the page. "She cannot last forever. The deed will be ours soon." Evelyn lunged toward me, her hands trembling with rage. "Stop it. You twisted my words." But Daniel grabbed her arm, holding her back. His voice shook. "Evelyn, is it true?" She froze, caught in his grip. Her eyes darted wildly, searching for an escape. I was only thinking of us. Thinking of our future." Daniel's voice cracked, louder now. "By destroying my mother? By mocking her? By treating her like she is already dead?" Evelyn's mouth opened and closed, but no defense came. The guests had seen enough. Some stood, shaking their heads. Mrs. Collins whispered sharply to another neighbor. "Ungrateful. Wicked girl." I closed the journal, my hand steady. "You wanted witnesses, Evelyn. Here they are. Every soul in this room has seen who you truly are." Silence fell heavy. Daniel released her arm, stepping back as though the very sight of her burned him. Evelyn's eyes filled with tears, but they were not the tears of guilt. They were the tears of someone watching her empire crumble. Then, with a voice low and sharp, I delivered the final strike. "This house has already been signed over. To Clara, my cousin, who cherishes our family's history. It will never be yours, Evelyn. Not now. Not ever." Her body stiffened, her eyes wide with disbelief. You gave it away? To a stranger? To blood?" I corrected, my tone unwavering. "To someone who values love over greed. That is something you will never understand." The room buzzed with murmurs. Evelyn's power had evaporated, leaving her exposed. Daniel sank into a chair, his face buried in his hands. He had no words, no defense for the woman he had chosen. And for the first time, Evelyn had no audience to charm, no ally to lean on. She stood alone. Finally, she let out a sharp laugh, brittle and bitter. "You think you have won, Margaret? You think this little display makes you strong? You are an old fool clinging to ghosts. And one day, those ghosts will be all you have." Her voice cracked on the last word. She turned on her heel and stormed out, the door slamming behind her. Silence swallowed the room. All eyes turned to me. I lifted my chin, my voice softer now. They thought I was weak. They thought my silence meant surrender. But wisdom never fades. And greed always destroys itself. The guests nodded, some clapping softly, others murmuring words of comfort. But inside my heart ached. Because victory does not erase the wound of betrayal. It only ensures the betrayer cannot wound you again. As the night ended and the guests left, Daniel remained, slumped in his chair, broken. I walked to him, laying a gentle hand on his shoulder. "You chose poorly, my son," I whispered. "But choices have consequences. And tonight you saw them unfold." He looked up at me, his eyes red. "Mother, I never thought it would go this far." I met his gaze, steady and unyielding. "It always goes far, Daniel, when love is blinded by greed." And in his silence, I knew my words had finally struck him where no rebuke ever had. But the aftermath still lay ahead, and the wound between mother and son would not heal easily. The house was quiet after the storm. The laughter, the music, the whispers, all gone. Only the old clock ticked steadily in the hallway, as if reminding me that time moves on, no matter how many hearts are broken in its passing. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of chamomile tea, the steam curling into the air. My hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from release. The battle was over. Evelyn had lost. Yet, victory tasted bittersweet. Daniel entered the room slowly, his steps heavy, his shoulders sagging as though he carried a lifetime of shame. He stood in the doorway for a long moment before speaking. "Mother, I do not know what to say." I looked at him, my eyes weary but kind. "Then do not say anything. Sit." He obeyed, lowering himself into the chair across from me. For the first time in years, he looked like the boy I once knew, uncertain, searching for guidance. His hands fidgeted on the table. "I never saw her like that before," he whispered. "Or maybe I refused to see. I thought she loved me. I thought she cared about our future." I sipped my tea, letting the silence sit before I answered. "Love built on greed is not love, Daniel. It is a bargain. And bargains always end with someone cheated." His eyes filled with tears. "I failed you. I let her mock you, hurt you. I was too afraid to confront her." I reached across the table, placing my hand over his trembling ones. "You failed yourself, not me. But now you know. And knowing is the first step toward changing." He bowed his head, his tears falling quietly onto the table. My heart ached, but I did not pull my hand away. Because though Evelyn's betrayal had cut me, Daniel's silence had cut deeper. And healing such wounds takes patience. For the next few weeks, the house was different. Evelyn moved out, her fury too large to stay contained in walls she could never own. Daniel remained, though his presence was quieter, subdued, his shame following him like a shadow. Sometimes I caught him lingering in the garden, staring at the hydrangeas we once planted together. Other times he sat by the oak cabinet, tracing his fingers over the carvings his father left behind. Slowly, I began to see the boy I remembered return, piece by piece. One evening, he came to me with a photograph. It was of Thomas, holding him as a child. He set it on the table carefully. "Father would be ashamed of me," Daniel said softly. I shook my head. "No. He would be disappointed, perhaps. But ashamed? No. Because he would know you can still choose better." He looked at me, hope flickering in his tired eyes. "Do you think I can?" I squeezed his hand. "I know you can." The house felt lighter after that. The neighbors, who had witnessed the truth that night, often came by to check on me. Mrs. Collins brought fresh bread. Others left flowers. They all said the same thing. "You showed courage, Margaret. You showed wisdom." But to me it was not courage. It was a necessity. Because when family betrays you, when greed poisons love, you do not fight with fists. You fight with silence, with patience, and with truth. Weeks turned into months. The deed, now safe with Clara, ensured that Evelyn could never touch the house again. And Daniel, humbled by loss, began visiting Clara too, learning the history of our family he had once ignored. The pain did not vanish. Betrayal leaves scars. But slowly, the wounds began to close. One evening, as the sun set and painted the sky with gold, Daniel sat beside me on the porch. He looked at me with quiet sincerity. "Mother," he said, "thank you for saving this home. Thank you for saving me from myself." Tears filled my eyes, but I smiled. "It was never about saving you, Daniel. It was about reminding you who you are. And you are not a man of greed. You are your father's son." We sat in silence then, watching the sky darken, the first stars blinking awake. For the first time in years, I felt peace. And now, I turn to you, dear listener. They thought I was weak. They thought my silence was surrender. But wisdom never fades. It waits. It watches. And when the time is right, it strikes with a power no greed can withstand. What lesson do you take from this story? Comment below.